And we'll see you at the movies.
Don't do that.
Don't
We've
do
talked
that.
about this. We have talked about this. That's not good.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is James, joined as ever by my friend Steve. And this is Every Best Picture, our ongoing series where we are looking at every single winner of the Academy Award for Best Picture from Wings right up to the present day. This episode, we are talking 1944's Going My Way.
James, the first thing I thought when I saw Going My Way, and this is one of the Every Best Pictures that I had not seen, and I'm
Same.
surprised that I hadn't, because it's really a good movie and I enjoyed it. But the first thing that kind of struck me as I'm watching it was trying to put it in the context of World War II. I mean, obviously the last couple films that we've been reviewing for Every Best Picture have been within the throes of what, one of the biggest wars, globe-shaping conflicts of the 20th century. And what really struck me is, one, how well people respond to this film and why they did it. And the fact is, it's a movie that puts a smile on your face. It's about good people doing good things. Bing Crosby playing Father O'Malley and coming in and, just every relationship he encounters or puts himself into, he redeems that relationship. And I think over the course of 2 hours, we see hard hearts melted. We see Grinches become, new people. And at the end of the film, everyone's got a smile on their face. The church is saved. People are married. Relationships are healed. And you could see a 1944 audience that is in the midst of World War II. They're not looking for an angst-driven plot. They're looking for a feel-good film that has them leaving the cinema with a spring in their step. And I can see why this film was so widely received at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit that I had never seen it before. I didn't really know what it was about. But looking at it, I was astonished to read that it was the biggest hit of the year, by quite some measure.
Yeah.
And, Bing Crosby was a big star already at that time, and he was throughout the 40s. The big realization I had watching this straight away is I don't think, and I might be wrong, but I don't think, or I can't say for certain, that I've ever seen a Bing Crosby movie before.
Oh, I have.
Mean,
yeah. I've seen White Christmas,
looked,
and there's Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at his sort of IMDb page, and I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I've heard of loads of these movies, White Christmas, all the Road to Wherever
the
movies
road
he
films,
did
yeah,
with Bob Hope, but I can't, in all honesty, say I've actually watched those movies all the way through. So that was interesting.
And you call yourself a movie reviewer? Those are iconic movies of the 20th century.
Yeah, I can't.
Man, go back and do your homework. Come on.
I mean, kind of to a certain American audience of that period, maybe. I mean, globally, are they really? I don't know. Maybe some of them, a few of them. I mean, White Christmas is obviously the ubiquitous one, and I know the songs. And I was surprised I knew how many of the songs I knew from this.
They're iconic of the American songbook.
Yeah.
The mule swinging on a star,
But
going
like
my way.
Swinging on the Star specifically was written for this movie, and
that I did not know. And which is, and you bring up an interesting point, James, in that although this film has so many firsts, I find it's not really in the collective cinema memory of today's audiences, like say a Casablanca or a Ben-Hur or other classics from 60, 70, 80 years ago. I'm actually surprised how downplayed this film is in cinema talk.
I think, I agree with you. Going My Way is not talked about very much. I think it only joined the pantheon of the National Archives. Every year they put like sort of 10 or 20 films in, and I think it is in there, but it only got put in there in about 2004, 2005, something like that. But I think while the film, and I agree, while the film itself is not talked about very much, I think its DNA persists to this day quite ubiquitously. Because one of the big takeaways I had, one of the negative takeaways I had is, I know this story. And I've heard this story, so many times in so many settings, the slightly off, sort of a bad boy from the wrong side of the tracks kind of thing comes into an establishment, shakes it all up, changes everybody's lives for the better, and then walks away.
Yeah.
Everything from The Searchers to Dead Poet Society to, countless other movies. And I'm sure there are ones where it's more specific, closer to this one. So it was immediately very familiar, exactly, what kind of movie, what kind of story this was. And I wonder, to audiences of 1944, how familiar that story was, or how much of a sort of pioneer this kind of model was at that point.
Well, yeah, you mentioned a couple Searchers and Dead Poet Society, but I was going for the more religious template of Sister Act. I mean, this is Sister Act just draws from this DNA. I mean, the girl from the wrong side of the tracks ends up in a Catholic environment, starts a choir, redeems relationships. I mean, as I was watching this film, I'm thinking, wow, Sister Act really drew from this well pretty heavily.
The one notable difference about that is that she was an imposter, wasn't she, in Sister Act?
Yes,
she wasn't a nun, and you do see that model a lot. Where they are, they're there in disguise, in hiding or whatever, trying to escape a certain situation, and they prove as good, if not better, at the job they're pretending is their real vocation, rather than the people around them. Whereas in this one, what I did like is that, yes, he's been a number of different things in the past, and he's led a life, ahead of this. He is a priest, and he's not pretending to be what he is. He is who he says he is, and he's just bringing all of that sort of worldly street talk, street knowledge to this rather stuffy establishment.
Well, I just love how in our Every Best Picture now I get to through the back door get you to review a faith-based film, because
within 5 minutes,
nobody's being eaten, nobody's this is just plain old Jesus, God, people doing good things. And I know James struggles with that, but
no, not at all. I'm just not naturally drawn to them. I will say, within 5 minutes, because I didn't know what this was about, and within 5 minutes of it studying, I was like, oh, Steve's gonna love this.
It's funny, within 5 minutes I thought, oh, I really should be watching this with my wife. Tammy will love this.
Yeah. And not only is it sort of a faith-based film, but it's about sort of Irish Catholic priests. It's
I just came back from Ireland, so I was like, Aye, Father O'Malley.
Exactly. I was like, oh, okay, yes, this is one for Steve, definitely. Yeah. But that all that said, I did enjoy it. It's one of those movies where it's not particularly plot driven, it's premise driven, and then it's vignettes. It's a series of like cases or whatever that he has to deal with, and I enjoyed a lot of those. There's the young girl who's running away from home, but she's 18, so she thinks she can do what she wants, played by is it Jean Heather? Mm-hmm. And when he teaches her how to sing better and all the rest of it. And then I particularly loved all the young street urchins.
Yes. Yeah.
And the main kid who talks like James Cagney. And so it immediately reminded me of Angels with Dirty Faces. Yeah. Which is a kind of similar plot where it's, the priest and the gangster who are influencing a group of kids, and they're kind of wrestling with the souls of the kids. It's like, are they going to turn them to good or bad? And the priest ends up persuading the gangster, played by Jimmy Cagney, to turn yellow when he's goes on death row, so that he shatters the illusion of it's cool to be a gangster and saves the kids that way. So I was reminded of that very strongly in this, and that main kid.
It was interesting though, because we've been talking about diversity in film and the Oppenheimer film, how people have been kind of seeing through a modern lens. Now, when I watch movies like this and they're panning the boys, and I'm like, well, there's no representation here.
No, they're all little white Irish boys, aren't they?
Little white Irish boys, and Seamus, and
So I enjoyed all of that. I'm not to get right into it. I'm not entirely convinced that the film is as strong as the sum of its parts. I think it's a film where it works in spurts, and Bing Crosby is fantastic in it, as is Barry Fitzgerald. And we'll get into some very interesting sort of facts and trivia about both the pair of them shortly. And I think that that's what carries the movie through. Are those two strong central performances and the development of that relationship, whereas everybody else comes and goes and what have you, as one would in a movie about an urban congregation. So it wasn't compelling in the way that some of the other films that we've been watching was, but I did enjoy it for sure.
I totally agree with you. I don't know if this movie had been shown in a time other than World War II, whether it would have won all the accolades and Best Picture that it did. Having said that, about halfway through the movie, I wanted to check to see if it had won Best Screenplay, and it had, because I thought this screenplay was tight. I thought it was the humor in it, the dialogue in it. I thought it was so snappy and witty for 1944. I mean, I wouldn't put it at Casablanca level, but I was surprised how, some movies from this time period can be very dated. And obviously there are aspects of this film that are dated. But by and large, I found the interactions between people, kind of the winks in their eye, the double entendres, at times things were being communicated that couldn't be communicated so overtly for a 1944 audience. And I thought it was done brilliantly. And it made me think of something I've raised on this show before with Krzysztof Kieslowski talking about censorship and just saying, he actually, I don't think he said he likes censorship, but it actually makes for a more creative process because, like he said, what's more interesting, a skier going really fast downhill or a skier that has to maneuver the gates and just touch the gate? And there's much more interest and something much more compelling in that kind of skill. And so watching how they would tackle certain elements in this film vis-a-vis how they would do it in today's audience, I actually found the 1944 version more creative and more fun to watch than just overt talking about sex and things like for a modern film today. So I enjoyed that aspect, and I thought, wow, winning Best Screenplay was well deserved.
Yeah, I know. It's like the old argument about budgets as well, isn't it? It's like, a film with a low budget has to make a lot of sort of creative decisions, and they've got to kind of like work with what they've got, and they're often, challenged in a way that produces great results. Whereas, if you've got all the money in the world at your disposal, then there's no challenge. There's no creativity involved.
You end up with the new Star Wars movies.
You just rather than the old Star Wars movies.
Exactly. Where they had to recreate this on a ping pong table, and exactly, and that's where the real sort of creativity comes in. Jaws is one of the classic examples of it. Yes.
Where they didn't have the budget and the shark wasn't working, and so that's where you've got all this tension came from, is not seeing the shark and having to cut around it because it was broken.
1975 technology, it was.
There you go.
It looked like a big rubber, thing.
I mean, and it's almost more impressive that it did win the Best Screenplay Oscar because of who it was up against. I mean, I always like to look at, who these movies, what other movies they beat out. There were different categories back in that time. There was an original screenplay, and then there was an original story, and it won the original story, and then it won screenplay. So there were like 3 different categories. But it beat out Gaslight. It beat out Double Indemnity, which is one of the great enduring films noir of that era, which was also up for Best Picture and all these other things that ended up not winning a great deal. And that's a movie that has endured in the public consciousness.
And same with Gaslight. Gaslight. We get the term gaslighting. That was.
Which has only really sort of come into the common parlance recently, within the last sort of 10 years, I would say. Yeah. Whereas that's exactly what it means, and that's what the movie is about.
And bringing it back to why doesn't this film have more in the collective consciousness? I grew up, and I probably could name at least 3 times that I've seen Gaslight. I'm familiar with Gaslight. I was not familiar with Going My Way.
No, I was not. And so, I mean, it was very much a product, like you say, of its time. It was a little ray of hope at a time when, I think maybe the tides were already starting to turn a little bit. But, actually, no, if this came out earlier in 44, then. Yeah.
And when it was filmed, it would have been like 43. It probably
it would have been at the depths of it. So I guess, it has this message of, there is still good in the world. There is a community behind you. You don't have to focus on the horrible things that are going on. The church is always here for you.
Yes. And it is, listeners, it is.
And you're
like the William Frawley character at the end. Oh, we got to do this in a church. I love how this is not really a new idea. It's like 80 years ago. People are like, do I really need to go to church and do this? And I'm thinking,
Right.
oh, Jane, I know this is James.
Well, yeah, it's a perpetual struggle, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what this film I think does very well is presents the church as you recognize it, and as the people who roll their eyes at it recognize it. It says, well, no, it can exist in whatever form that you need it to exist in, and we can make it. The challenge of the church in the 20th century is to make ourselves more accessible to people who are not invested in all the unnecessary pomp and ceremony of the Catholic faith and what have you. And I think that it does those things very well. So it says that, no matter what your background or your persuasion or whatever, there is a place for you here, particularly now at a moment where we are kind of at our lowest.
And Bing Crosby, basically, I mean, and this happens, as you mentioned earlier, as a trope through a lot of films of the young person coming in and saying, it doesn't have to be this way, it can be this way. And he tells that one time at the piano, he goes, religion doesn't have to be this, it can be this, and I'm thinking, wow, even 80, 90 years ago, the same thing I'm trying to do now in the church, Bing Crosby was doing and going my way. So
yeah, no, I mean, it's Bing Crosby.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot that you can credit him for. He was certainly becoming the biggest star of the era. So it's almost like having The Rock in your movie right now, or something like that. He's just like in everything, and everybody goes, anything you put him in is going to do well. It's as simple as that. And you've got these great sort of songs that were successful, but from the movie, but successful independently. So I think there were people who were coming to the movie or coming back to the movie because they like the songs, they like the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then you've got other big stars as well. You've got the real life opera singer Risa Stevens, who played Genevieve. Well, Genevieve Linden was like her stage name. I think her name was Jenny or something like
Jenny
that.
Tufnell or something like that.
Who had reinvented herself.
Yeah.
And so that was a fun little idea. That was a peek into his sort of past. That he had been something of a ladies' man, and that then he had made this decision, and she hadn't got the letter. She'd gone off on tour or whatever, and so he sought her out,
and not just me, but you remember Tim growing up with Tim. Tim's a priest too. Everybody you grew up with turned.
What have you done to these boys?
You made them run off to the priesthood.
So so there are all of those little elements in it which just help help carry the movie along, as it were, and so you can understand more and more why it was a big hit then. So I mean, looking at the Oscars of that year, it was nominated for 10 and it won 7, which is obviously a pretty big deal. I did have it all in front of me, and I've just closed it, so I've got it back. But the one thing that historically keeps it notable is that there was an unprecedented situation where clearly, and if there was an actor in a movie, you could nominate him for best actor or best supporting actor or whatever. It was up to you. These days, it is it is decided for you ahead of time which category you are going to be submitted into. Right. And there's actually a lot of controversy about it these days, where people feel that they're gaming the system. They're putting lead actors into supporting roles because, particularly where you've got like two leads. A movie like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a recent example, where arguably they're dual leads, but they were like, no, we're going to run Brad Pitt in best supporting actor because then they don't compete with each other. And so they're not going to split the vote in the way that, like, another random example, Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon did in Thelma and Louise.
Right.
They both ran for best actress, and it's commonly believed that they both lost because they split the vote.
They split the vote, yeah.
Right. Whereas something like Brokeback Mountain, Training Day is another example. Training Day is a very interesting example, actually. It's random, but where Ethan Hawke was put into best supporting actor, and Denzel Washington was put into and won best lead actor. Whereas actually, if you watch the movie, Ethan Hawke's in the movie way more than Denzel Washington is, and it's actually Ethan Hawke's story. He's the rookie on the first day who gets this incredibly reprehensible mentor figure, and so that was an example where people were like, if you're going to split it, fine, but it should be the other way around. And they were just like, oh no, Denzel, needs to be in.
It's his time. It's his time.
It's his status, I think, more than
Yeah.
anything. So anyway, so
Yeah.
you've got the situation this year where Barry Fitzgerald, who plays Father Fitzgibbon,
Yeah.
Fitzgibbon,
That's right.
was nominated in both categories. So not only were they able to vote for him in whatever, but enough people decided he was best actor and enough people decided he was best supporting actor that he actually ended up being nominated in both categories for the same performance. He won in best supporting actor because Bing Crosby won best actor, but running against his co-star who was also nominated in the other category, which was kind of crazy. And it was the first and only time it's ever happened. They were unprepared for this to happen. They went through. They let it happen. It turned out all right. That he won in the right. If he had won Best Actor instead, knocking out Bing Crosby and then still having that Best Supporting Actor nomination, that might have caused a bit more of an uproar.
Yeah.
But it seemed to happen the right way. Who knows? Maybe behind the scenes they he's getting enough votes. Let's just push them all over to supporting and let Bing win. Who knows what happened behind the scenes? Suffice to say, it never happened again, and new rules were put in place immediately afterwards so that you could only be nominated in one category. I mean, other than that, it won Best Picture, it won Best Director, and then a number and
it really swept. I looked at that. It really swept the awards that year.
It sure did. Which makes it more surprising that it's not still sort of talked about more.
So, kind of drawing this to a close, unless you have anything else to add, I was going to ask, does this stand the test of time? Does Bing Crosby's Going My Way, is this something that today's audience would say, yep, it's well-deserved for 1944 Best Picture? Okay,
so does it stand the test of time? Yes, I think it does. I think it's a engaging, entertaining movie. I think it's like we said, it's very much a snapshot of a very specific period and sensibility in American history. And I think for those reasons alone, not to mention the performances are great and the music is great. It still works as a very sort of entertaining, enthralling movie. Does it deserve its place in Oscar history? I'm not so sure. I mean, it's up against, as we mentioned, Gaslight, but Double Indemnity is. Stands as one of the all-time great film noirs, and was up and nominated in a number of major categories, but then didn't really win any of the big awards on the night.
But you could see World War II, people were not in as much responding to Double Indemnity as they were the feel-good Going My Way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. I mean, actually, Double Indemnity didn't win anything. It was nominated for 7 awards, didn't win anything. And it's an incredibly cynical movie, dark movie about sort of the shady underbelly of Californian society. And maybe that's not the movie that people wanted at that time. I mean, obviously people liked it and responded to it, but didn't want to celebrate it overly. Just saying, that's the one I would have voted for.
I tend to mirror your thoughts. It definitely stands the test of time. As I said, the screenplay is really tight, and I just found Bing Crosby, what he was able to add just with a roll of his eyes or an eyebrow move or just something like that. And when at the beginning, when he's having the encounter with the guy whose window he broke, and he goes, "You even throw like an atheist." I thought,
that was a good line.
Just stuff like that. Just was it was fun. And I mean, does it deserve that year? I mean, the fact is, it was produced in 1944, and it was for a 1944 audience, and it hit home. It found its target audience, and I was able to enjoy it 80 years later. And when they has the boys singing Silent Night, I'm just thinking Bing Crosby singing Silent Night is just glorious. So this gives me. I was pleasantly surprised to say how much I enjoyed this film.
For sure. I mean, going in knowing nothing about it, just seeing that poster with him in his like bow tie. I didn't even notice that he was a priest in that.
I had no idea it was about Catholic Church and priesthood or anything like that. But as a man of faith myself,
boy, do go on. Right. On that note,
let's let it go.
Let us go. So yeah, that's going my way. Next up is Billy Wilder's The Lost Weekend. We will get to that ASAP. If you have enjoyed this show, please check out our other videos. We have done every film up to this point in the every Best Picture series. We've got lots of other videos, lots of other reviews. Do check them out. Like and subscribe if you haven't. Thank you very much.
And we'll see you at the movies.
Don't do that. We've talked about this. We have talked about this. That's not good.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be. You're